Back to one of our top stories now. More revelations have surfaced in the murder of popular musician Oupa Sefoka, known as DJ Sumbody. The gun used now has been linked to 3 other murders, including that of fellow musician Hector DJ Vintos Buthelezi. The AK-47 was taken by the police following the murder of a Transnet engineer, Armand Swart, in April last year. Swart was killed in what's thought to have been a case of mistaken identity when a Transnet whistleblower was the actual target. Let's talk more now about this with a criminologist at the University of the Free State, Dr. Ashwill Ramon Phillips. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Phillips. Thanks very much for your time. There's clearly a lot that South Africans don't know about how these networks operate, and these details are quite disturbing. What are they telling us from what you and other people have actually been studying about this phenomena of hired guns and how they get to be procured to do this sort of work?
Good afternoon, Vuyo. Yes, organized crime networks, criminal syndicates, criminal gangs are highly structured, highly organized, and very tapped into underground markets, whether it refers to the procurement of illegal firearms or the drug trade, human trafficking, sex trafficking. So they are really highly organized, and they do have networks both nationally and globally.
What sort of keeps them together, so to speak, and what makes them as organized as they clearly are?
Well, one would have to look at the criminal gang philosophy or ideology in itself. So, I mean, this is a group of individuals who come together with crime as a central feature, but they are held together by intense group loyalty. They are held together by group beliefs, a code of conduct, the structure, whether it be from the top with the leaders of the hierarchy right to the bottom where you have your foot soldiers, and the gang philosophy as a whole, the respect amongst the group. So really there's a lot of issues that do tie them together.
Is it necessarily a new phenomenon, or are police getting better at tracking these people and finding them? Or is it a question of these gangs sort of becoming a bit too disorganized, perhaps, or leaving trails of evidence? In other words, have we become clumsy? Why are we suddenly sort of, what is responsible for bringing out into the open this information that previously we didn't actually see or at least know?
Well, it depends on the type of gang in question. So certain gangs are extremely well organized. Other gangs are not organized at all. What one must remember is that gangs are fluid and adaptable, and that's part of the essential component that makes them survive so long. And I mean, if you look at the history of South Africa, gangs predate the apartheid system. So gangs have been around for decades. Some become more organized, some become more advanced in their operation. And as I said, it depends on the type of gang. So in certain cases, you'd work with a youth gang who is perhaps less crime intelligent, if you want to call it that. But in other cases, you would have individuals that are extremely intelligent that make up these groups. So in certain regards, you could say that law enforcement have had some victories. But in other cases, I think, a lot of gang activity and gang-related crimes still remain hidden. We still don't know the true nature and extent of it. And a lot of these groups still get away with crime on a daily basis. So there have been strides in terms of your Prevention of Organized Crimes Act. However, there are also certain limitations in terms of that act managing gangs more specifically in comparison to an ordinary organized criminal group like a syndicate. In other cases, for instance, there have been successes by anti-gang units, provincial and national anti-gang strategies, but not all provinces have these type of strategies or anti-gang units. So it's province-specific, it's gang-specific, and it all really depends on the specific case or the merits of the specific case in question.
The role of state tenders in this phenomenon?
Yeah, you see that's also, it's part of the evolution and the fluidity of gangs. So a lot of the times you'll see now that gangs are moving more into exploitation. So in other words, exploiting businesses, exploiting community members, exploitation in the construction environment. And that's a new part of gang activity that perhaps is something less common to what we've known gangs to be, infamous for. So the same with things like tender fraud, for instance. Gangs are moving into that territory as well. And they do have ties, political ties. They do have ties to the police. They do have ties to other governmental organizations. So it is going to be extremely difficult to root out, especially in light of any statutory definition for the concept of a gang or gang-related activity, or, like I said, specific legislation that functions more preventatively rather than reactively. Because remember, what happens in the case of a gang-related crime is the investigation only starts after that crime has been committed or after it's been perpetrated, and we really don't have much preventative measures in place in that regard.
I mean, a lot has been said about, for instance, the case that, or cases that have brought about this conversation have to do with unlikely, shall we say, people. We're talking here about DJs, for example. I don't know if there's something or anything to be said about how these unlikely victims of this gangsterism.
Yeah, you see, it's difficult to say. It's not impossible for people like DJs or actors or musicians to have links to the criminal underworld, which I'm not saying is the case here or in related cases. It's also uncertain whether this does conform to, the accepted definition of what a criminal gang is. It may have been simply a hired hit or something similar. So, without really examining the case as a whole or holistically, it's quite difficult to determine.
And the availability of weapons, we're talking about AK-47s here, which means that there are people who are really determined and who are, needless to say, dangerous as well.
Yeah, the majority of gangs are quite dangerous, and what makes them dangerous is the fact that they usually don't hesitate, to make use of violence. And that's also one of the things that one needs to look into is, what does the gang philosophy within this gang or that gang look like, and what is the guiding principle within the gang? But if you just look at simple reasons why people get involved in gangs, violence is a big part of what bands the group together, and what leads to escalation in group loyalty. As I said previously, a lot of the times gangs would have free access to firearms. And yeah, that would range from anything from an AK-47 to an R5 rifle.
Yeah, but also, it's in Sefoka's case, DJ Sumbody, was killed in a hail of bullets and not just one or two bullets, which, as you say, shows quite a determination on the part of the perpetrators of this sort of thing. Dr. Ashwill, Ramon, Phillips, let me thank you very much for your time.